Arknights. You may know it as the tower defense gacha with some interesting ads, but behind that curtain is a deeply woven lore often skimmed over due to its overwhelming amount of text. I'll admit that I was guilty of this myself, but after seeing many discussions about different characters and events, I decided to give it a chance, and I'll be honest, it's really good, especially for a mobile game. Despite this, I definitely understand people's apprehension, as it can get very long-winded between fights, but that's why I wanted to start this series. So whether you're a longtime player, just starting, or maybe a bit curious about the series, I hope you enjoy this reiteration of the game. Arknight centers itself around you, the player, otherwise known as the Doctor, or Docta. You're the lead researcher for a company known as Rhode Island Pharmaceutical, on a planet called Terra. A world similar to ours, but the evolution, technology, and environment these characters deal with have gone through a much different course of history. Factions of countries have developed the ability to transport their populace via mobile countries referred to as nomadic cities. Often compared with the Mortal Engines moving countries, however, I always thought of the anime version in the Bothersome Country episode of Kino's Journey or Kino no Tabi. And if you know what that show is, you're awesome. Anyway, these technological advancements and the creation of the multi-method catastrophe prediction system? Let's call it the MCPS. This system allowed people to predict when and where these devastating natural occurrences would strike. The affected areas would see many varieties of natural disaster. Earthquakes, tropical storms, and even meteor showers were a possibility. These left high concentrations of a material called originium. Originium? Work with me on this. This material is a black translucent crystal that the universe of Arknights has revolved around since ancient times. It harbors an immense energy capable of being harnessed and channeled into fuel source or even as a catalyst for powers unique to this world. These magic-like abilities called originium arts and its practical use made it highly valued, sought after, and inevitably depended on. It was also the driving factor in many of the technological discoveries needed for the society to survive through the ever-pressing catastrophe crisis. Despite all of that, originium is actually the root of almost every issue the world of Terra faces. Prolonged and even brief exposure to the organic material could lead to a terminal disease known as erypathy. This is the condition you've been researching for Rhode Island Pharmaceutical. Before recent medical advancements, it was a grim fate for any inflicted with erypathy. Conditions typically began with hardened skin that over the course of a few days would begin to burn internally as crystallization began to form, usually bearing characteristics identical to originium itself. The crystallization would then begin to spread, making breathing difficult while also shutting down the body, ultimately leading to death, though life expectancy was varied. In addition to this, it would occasionally unlock or amplify art abilities within the user. However, the more they used these abilities, the closer they came to death. Now, this pandemic began to cause a stigma between the different races inhabiting this world as the disease became more and more prevalent. The two main groups of races are the Ancients and the Elders. The Ancients come in a broader variety of appearance than the Elders, as the race's characteristics derive from different species of animals that we're typically used to finding on Earth. Feline, canine, avian, reptile, etc. And these are more of your typical cross between a human and a creature or anime character looking kind of person, etc. Elder characteristics, however, are more centered around mythological beings like angels and demons, who have already a bit of human resemblance in some regard at least, and subsequently they only have 4 main races. The Dern as the dwarves, the Oni as the demons, the Sancta as the angels, and the Sarkaz being split by vampire and Wendigo Sarkaz is... Regardless of the race, you can generally expect the characteristics to follow a guideline that may include the ears, horns, tail, or other features respective to the animal/creature that they derive from. Fun fact, actually, most animal-esque ancients have a set of human ears, as we can see here with Broca. Now, with the exception of the Sarkaz, the ancients were much more susceptible to erypathy than the elders, and with how severe the conditions of erypathy were, society began to ostracize those afflicted with the disease. They started labeling them as infected, usually casting them out into terrible conditions, and or forcing them into labor camps where the work typically centered around harvesting originium, which in turn made the condition of their erypathy worse. Years of mistreatment, neglect, and segregation led to more social disruption, ultimately leading to 2 factions of infected seeking reform, with much different stances on the approach. Reunion is a group who seek retribution for the way the infected have been treated. Though originally a peaceful group who'd often protest in pro-infected rallies, there was a sudden radical shift in their approach to the oppression. However, the objective at large for them is not as clear as before. Most, if not all, of their ranks aim to get back at the world in some manner, now forcing rather than pleading for their place in society. Their mentality is typically reckless, and many within their ranks do not hesitate to use tactics with little to no regard for the well-being of citizens or even their own soldiers. Despite this, they still manage to rally followers capable of pulling off big-scale operations thanks to their strong network of leaders. On the other side of things, we have Rhode Island's pharmaceutical company, and ironically, the acronym for that is RIP, though they're more often than not referred to as just Rhode Island, and I'm going to start just calling them RI to make things a little bit shorter. So, RI is a faction that started out as a research and development company trying to discover medical solutions to help resolve the eripathy pandemic consuming the world. Composed of both infected and non-infected personnel, the company allowed any infected to receive treatment regardless of financial status. In exchange for treatment, the patients would then take up roles as operators for RI. Typically, patients were enlisted with logistics, but in special cases, if a patient was willing and showed the aptitude, they would take up a position with the paramilitary branch. This branch of RI was created to provide security for both personnel and patients. Shortly before the events of Arknights unfold, the company was able to remain neutral in the ongoing conflict and made many groundbreaking discoveries that allowed the infected to live semi-normal lives, but this was thrown off course after an internal compromise led to the assassination of the previous RI leader. After this, information gets pretty scarce. Things aren't completely clear as to how and why you end up in the state you're in. You find yourself recalling a memory of someone before being awakened from what seems to be a cryosleep procedure. You awake to the girl from the memory and a couple people dressed for combat. She introduces herself as Amaya, a brown-haired girl with rabbit-like features. It's clear that she knows you, but you are suffering from a case of amnesia with the only thing you can recall being that faint memory from before. Before things can be discussed further, you are met with an ambush and Amaya asks you to lead the fight, explaining that you've fought together many times before and believes that with her help you'll be able to lead them to victory. She then transfers the command of the operatives to you as you interject to ask who they are. She tells you that you are one of them and to try and remember their common name, Rhode Island. You assume command with some assistance from Amaya and are able to successfully repel a handful of enemies. You are then introduced to another RI operative, Doberman, a dark-haired girl with, well, Doberman-like features. As you follow her out of the area, she is suddenly taken aback. The scene before you is utter chaos. Streets are completely flooded with Reunion soldiers overrunning the military and killing any civilian in their path, while screaming things like, "Death to all Chernos!" Your squad is left a bit distraught from the amount of bloodshed, and realize they're completely outnumbered and need to take action. After quickly finding a place to hide, it seems you're about to be discovered when some soldiers find a woman hiding in another alley nearby. Amaya can't take sitting by and watching much longer, and decides it's best to ambush them and take them out before anyone else notices. Doberman seems to agree, and you prepare to attack. Amaya surprises them with a blinding flash from her arts, and then the battle starts. You're successfully able to eliminate the small batch of enemies without alerting anyone else. Afterwards, Amaya rushes to help the lady, who seems to lash out at her in fear due to Amaya being infected. Because of your amnesia, this catches you off guard, leading to a discussion revealing a couple bits of info I covered earlier, including your role in RI, but understandably, you're still processing everything as it's a lot to take in. Injuries are then assessed, and the team realizes the severity of the situation and just how well formulated Reunion's plans are despite their chaotic nature. It's determined that the entire nation of it's basically Russia, has been overthrown by Reunion. You then overhear an emergency broadcast that mentions the 7 royal guards being injured, followed by reports of the military having everything under control, when it's clear that they don't as you continue to witness the national defense being completely overwhelmed. Amaya then urges you to prepare your squad as some scouts have reported enemy forces getting close to your location. As expected, the soldiers show up, you're able to get the jump on them and engage them head on. After everything is said and done, you come across a Chernobog military force who is a bit hostile at first due to the infected members on your team, when suddenly one of the higher-ranking members of Reunion emerges. A girl with red hair and dark clothes stands before you, but you're given little time to analyze the situation before you're attacked. Your team manages to escape after disposing of a couple of squads of Reunion soldiers. You again find yourself in a fight as your team is trying to regroup with another RI squadron led by an operative named Neural. Along the way, you meet up with another RI operative named Ace. Ace had concerns about Reunion's interference and decided to bring backup when your squads face yet another wave of enemies. However, within their ranks are soldiers with powers similar to your operators capable of using arts. After the fight's over, it's shown how RI helps bridge the gap between infected and non-infected people by highlighting an infected operative's appreciation for a non-infected medic's resolve on the battlefield. You move on to the next location while the team assesses just how far Reunion is willing to go by choosing to keep the nomadic city in place while on the verge of a catastrophe appearing. Just some speculation, but my guess is this is what led to RI's urgency to awaken and retrieve you. Doberman then begins to express how little the lives of the enemy troops mean to Reunion by comparing their leader's behavior to a tyrant she served in a previous war. She begins to explain how they were nothing more than expendable pawns left to die after they serve their purpose, as it's more efficient than keeping them managed when there are so many willing to fill the void they leave. The weight of her words sets in with the other members before her attention is directed to an enemy squad. You decide it's best to engage them preemptively, and after successfully routing the enemy, you make your way to Chernobog's Midtown for a brief pause when you're ambushed by the red-haired girl from before. The team does their best to fend off the enemy, but it seems like you're cornered and out of options when the fight suddenly interrupted by what seems to be a frail child. He addresses the red-haired girl's crown slayer, and tells her that the situation is well within his grasp, and to retreat. She seems to begrudgingly accept the order before disappearing with her men. The boy then apologizes for not greeting us, and briefly mentions that your squadron was not Reunion's original target. He introduces himself as Mephisto, claiming to be the leader of the Reunion movement, reveals that he got caught up with the show that was your fight, and wanted to have some fun with you and your squad. Suddenly, the conversation is interrupted by a signal flare shot off by Doberman. Mephisto then goes off on a self-serving rant that aggressively shifts towards Amaya after she interrupts him to point out that there really isn't much time left to escape the approaching catastrophe when he just ultimately decides to launch an attack against you. Your team does its best to hold on, but they're pushed to their limits once more when a squad led by a blonde girl with horse-like features and heavily armored equipment appears and sends the fight in disarray. It's revealed to be the operative that you were trying to regroup with, Neural. Her squad then gives your team an opening to escape with her to safer grounds. While being pursued by Mephisto, Neural turns to address him. She states that there is no way Mephisto was the commander-in-chief, as the Reunion soldiers he commands seek nothing but to slaughter, hunt, and burn to satisfy his sadistic desires. Neural continues to ridicule his actions and again calls out the fact that Mephisto is not the Reunion leader but a soldier sent to create chaos when he cuts her off. Calling for someone out of sight, he addresses as Faust to take a shot at her. Neural is able to deflect the formidable shot with her shield, leaving Mephisto in disbelief, but it's not long before he gives the order to fire again. Amidst a disruption, your squad sets up a formation to break through the enemy lines and lead a counterattack before Faust was able to take further action. As the fight comes to an end, it's clear that all enemy units have been eliminated, but there's no sign of Mephisto anywhere. Your team collects themselves and Neural takes heed about the enemy's prowess, claiming that a second shot from Faust would have practically destroyed her shield hand. It's revealed that Mephisto ran off with Faust, and a psychotic child shows some compassion and care towards Faust. After a brief checkup, Mephisto asks him to track down the RI operatives while he rallies more Reunion members. After Faust heads out, Mephisto then begins to rally his troops. Mephisto screams out to them, "Brothers and sisters, it's time to go. Let's go embrace our time." To which they reply, to liberate everyone. It's possible that this is a hint at Reunion's objective. It very well may be that their form of liberation is to make everyone infected, thinking that this would cut out all of the discrimination and oppression. As your squad makes its escape, one of the operators point out how dark it's getting. Doberman makes note of the oncoming catastrophe that is now visible on the horizon of the skyline, before directing her attention to the amount of Reunion soldiers deployed despite this. Neural, a medic, and Amaya then chime in with what seems to be a joke about the Reunion taking a catastrophe picnic. Though the tension was lifted, it's short-lived when Amaya spots an enemy squadron. You all decide to engage while attempting not to alert the rest of the enemy to prevent drawing more attention and a bigger fight than you can handle. After successfully routing the enemy, Doberman speaks up. Apparently during the battle, she had investigated further ahead and reported that though the enemy was mostly made up of stray mobsters, that there were also many well-trained combat personnel within their ranks. She follows up with a remark about how this is most likely the quote-unquote neural system of Reunion. She then explains to an inquiring operator how Reunion probably just orders them to convene and lead the soldiers. Both seem in disbelief that Reunion was even capable of conducting something on this scale, using a force with the majority of it being common thugs with no military training. After some back and forth, Doberman concludes that what drives them must be terror and fear. The operator, now low in spirits, began to question if there was even a chance for them to accomplish what they set out to do when Amaya jumps in and remarks that it's not a matter of is there, but a matter of can we. And I just have to say that those don't sound that different in principle. You know, they seem like very similar mindsets, but hey, he apologizes for freaking out before Doberman ends the conversation by reminding them all of the oncoming catastrophe. Continue to progress through the city as the medic notices a clinic and asks Amaya if they've been there before. She confirms, but is sad to find it in ruins, clearly laid to waste during the Reunion invasion, when an operator points out that it was Azazel, a clinic for the infected. His tone then shifts, and he states that despite them having access to the underground intelligence network, that they refused to work with RI, and probably knew about Reunion's intentions. He then lashes out, clearly thinking that if they had informed RI that a lot of this could have been prevented, and that they probably could have escaped by now. Maya interjects, stating it's not as simple as that. Then find out that Amaya was present to some sort of negotiation between Azazel and another faction, but the operator continues before Ace cuts him off. He states that it's hard for the infected to trust anyone, explaining that after everything they've been through, it's understandable for them to have some animosity still. Amaya follows up and states that she understands their actions and is able to forgive them, before continuing to explain that the infected can't even trust each other. After all this, you step up and ask about the clinic. Amaya explains that they were a black market clinic that only provided service to the infected, but they couldn't do so openly because of, well, all the previous mentions we've discussed. This is also when we learned that some infected still choose to hide in the cities to avoid being thrown into quarantine. And clinics like Azazel were the only way they managed to survive, but despite this, they were shown no mercy from Reunion. It's more than likely that Azazel rejected a proposal from Reunion and, well, you can see the outcome of that. Maya then addresses you and explains how the infection not only granted tremendous power, but also prevented a normal life. The rights are stripped away by the air-quoted civilized society, before mentioning that Chernobyl has made themselves a shining beacon of this civility by fearing, hating, exiling, and even purging the infected. You learn that the infected typically don't even really get an option of joining organizations like RI and Reunion, and just how significant this clinic was, as a place to call home, and a place to find help in a world that seemed to want nothing to do with them. After a brief explanation about RI's goal to wrap everything up, the operator seems to have calmed down a bit, and shows more empathy and appreciation towards the clinic. Because really, when you boil it down, they weren't much different from RI, and vice versa. And with that, you continue with your escape. Real quick, I just want to mention that for the first half of this script, I was actually using a website to look up a translated version of the CN story. After going about it for a while, I realized that there was a couple of operations missing, so I don't know if it was something that was maybe added to Global later on, but I decided for the sake of just keeping it accurate for Global, I'm going to strictly use that, and that's what the latter half of this is. And so with that out of the way, let's get back to things. From here, the squad continues forward. Neural and Doberman start discussing different means of approach as you make your way closer to the objective. Doberman suggests splitting up as the current size of the party makes it difficult to cover ground without being spotted, but Neural is concerned about the squads being picked off one by one. This is one of the few moments where you get to chime in and suggest a frontal assault using guerrilla tactics, or basically a hit and run type of attack to disrupt the enemy formation. Neural commends the idea while Doberman seems skeptical and asks for Amaya's opinion before commenting further. Amaya agrees with our plan of action, but makes a remark saying it's too early to completely trust you, but believes that with time you'll prove that you're capable of leading them. Doberman agrees and expresses that she's optimistic, just from what she's witnessed of you already. Which, okay, sure, that seems on par with what you were just saying, but anyways. You thank her and she dismisses it, stating not to be so formal, before Neural cuts the conversation to get things rolling with the next assault on Reunion. The battle seems to be taking its toll on the squad, even with Neural seemingly overwhelmed. An operator shouts that the enemy is gathering behind you and Doberman takes out an enemy unit as the squad begins to make a retreat. Neural laments her frustration and questions how a bunch of petty mobsters were able to force your hand. Despite the previous struggle, your squad was able to shake the enemy, and you all find yourself approaching the exit out of the city. Ace then makes a remark about how the clearing before them used to be the town square, but was left before them was nothing but ruins. Doberman is curious on why Ace seems so impacted by this, but before she can ask, Ace spots some civilians. After getting a better look, it's clear that they're being attacked by Reunion members, causing Amaya to almost jump the gun and initiate a fight. Unfortunately, no matter how they consider the approach, the situation would put them at a disadvantage and risk casualties. Amaya is visibly struggling with the decision, so Neural speaks up and brings up the fact that she's a knight, so Amaya knows that she isn't alone in this moral dilemma and is carrying that pain too. After some wise words from Doberman as well, Amaya is able to calm down and decides that despite how much it kills them inside, it's best not to jeopardize the mission. The events continue to unfold. It's obvious that your efforts would have been in vain anyhow, and you continue to make your way towards the exit when a large number of enemies appear and block your path. You have no choice but to engage the enemy and try to break their lines. After an exchange with the enemy force, you are shown Mephisto going off about how we're trapped downtown, but after some more thought, realizes there's a chance that you could escape as the oncoming catastrophe hits Chernobyl. Then an unnamed female with piercing amber eyes, silver hair, and black horns is shown listening in, and seems to take interest when Mephisto mentions that it could hinder their plans if you did escape with the knowledge of Chernobyl's takeover. Back at the downtown exit, your squad is doing their best to hold their own, but are struggling as the enemy attacks relentlessly. Nerl and Doberman remark that it's almost as if they're killing themselves one by one. Suddenly you're shown Crownslayer, the woman who is listening to Mephisto, and another unnamed woman bearing long silver hair topped with rabbit-like ears and cold eyes. The woman with rabbit-like features makes a comment on how chivalrous you are to the other two, before it cuts back to Doberman, Nerl, and Ace fighting off the endless waves of reunion members while making remarks about how they're just using themselves as cannon fodder to push you back. You then hear an operator cry out that their defenses can't hold much longer when suddenly, several large pieces of debris crash into the area. The catastrophe is beginning to engulf all of Chernobyl, and your squad prepares for the worst. Amidst the dust, you see Crownslayer and the woman with black horns who is revealed to be Tallulah, standing in front of an army of reunion members. Crownslayer asks Tallulah what they should do. She begins to state, "If they survive the calamity," before cutting herself off. She then orders them to try and stop you from escaping, adding that she wants to see to what extent you struggle before giggling to herself. Amaya then shouts to sober up and brace for the calamity when a crash of thunder rings through the air. Several explosions go off very close to your squads as a storm rains down meteors and shards of originium. Doberman does her best to get everyone to spread out and brace for the oncoming shockwaves, but the catastrophe is relentless and from every direction destruction is occurring. Briefly shown a dying reunion member screaming in pain, begging for his life when Amaya cries out for the casters to use spells on the building to make cover from the storm. Suddenly another meteor strikes a nearby building and large chunks of debris begin to fall. You command the casters to shoot the falling pieces with their spells. They manage to destroy some, but it's not enough when you then yell for the reunion casters to do the same. They hesitate, but quickly come to their senses and join the attempt to save everybody. Though mostly destroyed, the reunion members suffer many casualties from the debris, and you are barely able to escape yourself, thanks to Nerl grabbing you at the last second. The remaining reunion members redirect their attention back to you, and begin an assault in an attempt to prevent your escape. You command Nerl to lead the team to the lower downtown exit, and you take charge as the battle begins with explosions still raining down from all directions. Fierce battle ensues between your squad and the remaining reunion members amidst the catastrophe. After some time passes in a long struggle to both fight and endure the catastrophe, your squad breaks away from the fray and continues towards the exit. Doberman and Nerl realize the eye of the storm was moving, but nevertheless it was still a threat. Fragments and shards continue to rain down relentlessly, and another explosion occurred close to your squad, and in the distance, Ace spotted the reunion members hot on your tail. The medic on the team was suddenly frozen with fear by the large number of enemies still alive and approaching from every nook and cranny, but Nerl is able to bring her to her senses before calling for a defensive formation. Suddenly, you find yourself surrounded. But they're keeping their distance, staying just outside of range for combat when suddenly a single figure comes forth. Some of your operators take aim before Amaya and Nerl realize it's Tallulah, the reported leader of Reunion, and they lower their weapons. She calmly walks closer as the catastrophe begins to pick back up in strength, with explosions raining down in the nearby vicinity, but her disposition never falters. Nerl turns to Amaya and tells her to take you and leave immediately, but she refuses, trying to reassure an outcome of victory by working together. Nerl of course presses the matter again and states that Tallulah is just too powerful for them to handle, and asks if she can really assure your safety. Amaya hesitates and finds herself lost for words. Nerl tries to continue with her plan to hold her off for as long as she can while you two escape when Ace interjects saying that he will take her place, but Amaya speaks up once more, refusing to let them fight alone. Doberman then cuts her off and states it's not the time for this, but she pleads, again stating that she just can't watch members of RI sacrifice himself, but Ace reassures her that they'll be able to escape alive. Now Amaya is the one saying it's not the time for this when Tallulah catches everyone's attention. She begins to make a large concentration of heat from her hand that appears to distort the area around her just from the sheer intensity of the art. Nerl charges forward, and Amaya cries for her to stop before she's killed. Tallulah merely replies, "Silence," before sending a powerful explosion at Nerl, sending her flying backwards. She hits the ground and Doberman rushes to her side. She's still alive, but hurt badly. She tries to dismiss Doberman's concerns, saying that she's just a little warm. As she's looking her over more closely, Doberman realizes that all of her armor was destroyed by that single shot. But alas, Neural tries to face her again and tells Doberman to stay back. Tallulah breaks up their discrepancy by firing another attack. Ace yells to get down and they're just barely able to dodge an intense wave of heat that soared over their heads. He then states that the arts were basically an invisible flame that swept over their head and tells everyone to fall back as the block is literally beginning to melt around Tallulah. Needing an opening, Ace calls for sniper operators to take aim at her. She looks back and replies, "Resistance will usher hope into this land, but resistance will not change your fate." Ace screams for them to fire. Unfazed by this, she continues, "Shernobog has already obtained liberation. Our work here is done, and your group has proven to be quite interesting. However, that is all you are worth. You have chosen poorly. Rhode Island, you should have stood firmly with the infected." Suddenly, she releases an art that scorches the entire plaza in an instant. The air becomes so hot, it burns to even breathe, and everything within her immediate vicinity has been reduced to nothing, almost as if a nuke went off. She continues once more, "You have the resilience of liberators." Operators talk amongst themselves in horror and disbelief when Neural turns to Amaya again, telling her that she knows what she must do, because someone has to stop her. Tallulah interrupts them. "I grow tired of this," when a white flash pierces the area and suddenly Tallulah is in front of you and Amaya. "This is the price you must pay for slaughtering your fellow infected. I shall grant you an ending that I am quite fond of. Disappear." Doberman screams for everyone to run and protect you and Amaya as the area begins to rise more and more in temperature. Neural runs, trying to throw herself in front of the attack, but is just too far to do anything. And in the path of travel is the medic operator, and she screams in fear as it seems that her life is coming to an end. To her surprise, she finds herself unscathed and looks up to see Amaya countering the attack. Amaya screams, "You will not hurt them!" Tallulah looks on at her solemnly. "I will never allow you to do that!" Amaya casts a powerful pitch black art forward that catches Tallulah's attention. She then counters the art with her own attack that overpowers Amaya's and begins to overwhelm her. "I must protect everyone!" She fires an even more devastating art that manages to keep the attack at bay. In the distance, Neural, Doberman, and the medic begin to express concern that even she'll be overwhelmed. "Don't worry about me. I can handle this. I want to. I must protect you all." She then lets out an amazing surge of power, and what appears to be black matter begins to seal off all of Tallulah's arts. Amaya screams out in pain though, as her barrier struggles to contain the power, and catches fire. You see Doberman yell for her to stop, stating that her ring will... Amaya cuts her off. "I don't care! Even if... Doctor, I'm sorry. Even if this brings disaster. Even if I don't want to lose the person dearest to me ever again." Tallulah chuckles in the distance. "Very good." She continues her attack and Amaya cries out again, getting closer and closer to facing death. Neural can't take it anymore though, and jumps in and begins reciting an art to attempt to disrupt Tallulah, and Doberman screams for you to escape. Tallulah and Amaya continue to exchange in a barrage of attacks, but it's clear that Tallulah is dominating the fight. Suddenly, Ace steps in and intercepts the force of Tallulah's attack. "That's enough, Amaya." "What?" "Doberman, take her with you. I'll see you soon." She grabs Amaya and Amaya screams for him. "Promise me that you'll..." "I'm sorry, Doctor. You might not remember me, but I remember you. And I know what kind of person you are. There will be a day where you and Amaya will face this cruel land together. That is why. You must cherish her, Doctor. Let's go. Godspeed." And with this, your team then takes up arms and continues towards the exit. But along the way, you are met with several reunion interceptions. The team is able to break through the ranks of enemies, but a larger group is approaching at the exit with Crown Slayer at the lead. In a joint effort, the team is able to fend her off, but she is very much alive and well. But it was enough to disrupt the encirclement that was surrounding you, and so you make your way, carrying Amaya through all of this. She actually passed out from exhaustion, but your team is managing to get away. Neural seems to be almost borderline distraught with a mixture of emotions, and she begins to scream before Doberman cuts her off for the sake of Amaya, then looks down at Amaya and praises her for just how well she was able to stay level-headed, before reminding Neural that she was a Radiant Knight and that it was her duty to remain a beacon of hope. Unbeknownst to everyone, Amaya begins to wake up as they discuss how they can't burden her with the news of, well, she's already carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. They're afraid it'd be too much for her to find out that, well, Ace and the rest of his squad did in fact sacrifice themselves in order for you all to escape safely. This seems to bring Neural to her senses, so you all decide to regroup with what remains of the party. As you continue towards the exit, it's clear that Amaya is still recovering. Despite the previous conversation, she still asks you to be let down and starts to ask about Ace and the others. You can't bring yourself to tell her, but your silence speaks volumes. Despite this, Amaya tries to reassure that Ace will be fine before needing to lean back on you for support. Clearly, she's exhausted. We then cut back to Tallulah and Mephisto trying to assess just how Ace managed to hold off her attack for as long as he did. Let me remind you that she was literally melting steel and reducing most of the area to either ash or nothing. The woman with rabbit ears then commends Ace for fighting to the bitter end. Tallulah speaks up. "I'll remember this, Rhode Island." The party is now finally making its way out of Chernobyl when they're again intercepted by another group of Reunion forces. But at the forefront is an unfamiliar Sarkaz girl bearing red horns and silver hair. "Did you really think we'd let you just stroll out of Chernobyl? Don't you think it's about time for someone to wake you up from your little daydream?" Superman turns to you and Amaya and states that communications have been restored and that reinforcements will be coming shortly. Nearly interrupts and... Neural interrupts and cries out that the woman is carrying explosives before several blasts are discharged. It seems that this caused Doberman to lose communications with the recon team, and this is when Amaya turns to the assailant. "Who are you exactly?" "I don't expect you to know who I am, but I know that person next to you." "Is Reunion going to continue fighting us?" Hey, don't be like that." The woman then states that she has no love for Tallulah, and seems rather bothered by being called out to stop your escape, and then asks, "For the sake of future cooperation, why don't we exchange some pleasantries first? You may simply call me W. I've waited a long time to see that person next to you." "Doctor? I have a few little questions I'd like to ask them. Would you be so kind as to give us some alone time?" Neural seems apprehensive and interrupts the conversation, but W tries to maintain the peace by mentioning that she has some information that could prove useful to you and states that she has seen some people with uniforms similar to your squad's. She then begins to prod at Amaya, questioning why so many people are willing to sacrifice their lives for her, which leaves Amaya distraught. Then turns her attention to you and asks if you're worth sacrificing their lives over. You attempt to reassure Amaya and try to continue to the exit, but W continues to antagonize Amaya, forcing both of your hands, and you lead your squad into combat once again. After many waves of Reunion soldiers are defeated, W makes her way into the fray. With the conjoined efforts of everyone, you're able to fend her off, but she still stands firm. "Ah, what a nostalgic feeling. Amaya, was it? I see. So that's what's going on. I remember now, Amaya." "What?" "I've already gotten what I came for. You can all go now. Shoo." Both Amaya and the remains of the Reunion soldiers are in disbelief. "What? Do you want to stay here and die? That's perfectly fine by me. You're all free to do as you please." Ultimately, they stand down and claim that Tallulah's orders are to let them go. Still left in confusion, Amaya is then addressed one last time by W. "Forget it. Things get boring when they get dragged out too long. I hate being bored. That's all there is to it. However, I do look forward to seeing you again, Amaya, as well as that person."
"What?"
"Next time, I will hear the truth from you, Doctor. Bye." She then disappears into the distance with the rest of the soldiers. Your squad then gets back on track and begins to make the retreat towards Rhode Island. We are then shown Ace and one of the guards from his squad. "Boss, where are the others?"
Neural and the others have already broken out with Amaya and the Doctor. Those who stayed behind, they're all gone.
"What?"
We're the only two left.
I remember now. That freak Tallulah. Single-handedly, she knocked away our guards like they were toy bricks. That monster cut through our defenders as if they were butter.
Hush, your wounds are deep.
The Catastrophe. She is Catastrophe incarnate. How else could she have reduced our squad to ashes in an instant? Even though I saw it with my own, I can't believe the screams. Ugh.
Snap out of it.
I'm so sorry. I don't know how to...
Just calm down. I gave you some emergency treatment.
Boss? What happened to your arm?
At least I still have one I can use.
Boss, you should go. I'm sure you'll be able to break your way out.
We only managed to stall her for a few minutes. Until the doctor and Amaya are safe, I cannot go. I have to stop that monster first.
Boss, I also...
The price of your life was paid with my arm. If you can live even a single minute longer, it'll be worth it. I'll be right back. You take care of yourself.
Boss, I'm sorry that I'm so unworthy. Amaya, I'm sure you'll be able to make everyone's dreams. We then cut back to the medic calling out for Amaya. It's not clear whether we were just shown Ace's last moments, or if Amaya was able to experience them, but the medic checks in on Amaya, who is spacing out, and she tells her she's okay, that she was just overstruck with grief when the medic starts crying. Don't cry, at least for now. Someone once said to me, tears should be saved for when the war is over. Now is not the time. Let's go. We're going home. Chapter 1. Evil Time Finale.